Hey, what's up guys? So today I'm going to go over a Diablo 4 wishlist. We're going to be talking about things that were really well executed in the previous Diablo games that I would love to see make a return in the upcoming Diablo title. We're going to actually go through all of the Diablo games. We're going to be talking about things from Diablo 1, Diablo Hellfire, Diablo 2, as well as, of course, Diablo 3. Now let's go ahead and just hop right into it. So first off, the things that I really enjoyed from Diablo 1 was essentially feeling helpless. The first fight that you encounter with the Butcher is absolutely very memorable for me personally. Just being able to go right into the room, opening up that door, not knowing what was behind it, and then instantly hearing
fresh meat.
That was so incredibly different as far as an experience compared to any other boss that I've ever faced. That sense of feeling so helpless when he just walks up to you and he infinitely hit stuns you and you die. You knew that at that point that the game was serious, and sometimes players would just not even fight the Butcher. I remember as a kid, he was so scary that I just didn't want to go ahead and open up that door until way later on. I came back when I was way over leveled, and then finally defeating him, and then you'd get the cleaver. That was so cool. It was a really awesome experience being able to defeat something that you felt like, wow, this guy was insanely powerful. And I feel like the later Diablo games didn't make you feel nearly as helpless as that. The closest thing that I feel like that that you can relate that to is maybe in Diablo 3 when a waller walls you off and you can't do anything. That's more frustrating than it is feeling really helpless, if that makes sense. Because while it is kind of similar in a sense, it's nowhere near as impactful and, I guess, memorable as essentially the Butcher. But also with Diablo 1, one thing that I personally did kind of enjoy was the freedom that Diablo 1 did offer, making it so the spells or skills weren't specifically locked to a class, unless we count the hero skills, which I'll get into in a second. But basically, most of these skills and spells you can learn as long as you had the right amount of magic. Technically, you were capped at certain classes for your attribute points, but being able to just go ahead and get skills that were just skills like in Path of Exile where anyone could just go ahead and pick up that item or be able to utilize that spell, I liked that. That was a really cool experience. However, I understand that in Diablo 1 we had those class hero skills where like the warrior was able to repair the items, the rogue was able to reveal the traps and disarm them, and on top of that the sorcerer was able to recharge the staffs. I think that that was a really cool feature, that each class had like kind of a skill that was just built in and didn't cost any mana. I like that. That was really cool. Another thing that I thought was really cool in Diablo 1 was in some of the areas, when you would go into the crypt, it would be so dark you couldn't really see, and there would be enemies that would fade in and out. And I thought that was a pretty cool mechanic, not necessarily needing to be in every single area, but that was just a small little thing that I wanted to mention. Another thing is, in Diablo 1 and 2, I felt like there was a lot more mystery to exploration, especially with the questing. In Diablo 3, there was very little incentives to do certain quests. At the point where once you've maxed out a character, there's no point of going through some of the campaign and doing some of the quests like in Diablo 2, where you'd actually gain stat points or attribute points, or like the Golden Bird and Jade Figure, where you're able to go ahead and increase your stats and your max life. And then there's also rescuing Anya. Like, there were so many quests that were way more impactful in specifically Diablo 2, but I also felt like Diablo 1 had a lot more unique exploration, like, of course, Garbag the Weak. There's just a lot more, I guess, encouragement for exploration, where, like, some of these things just were a lot cooler because at the time, we just really didn't see that in a lot of games, but I did like that. And also, most items are not locked to classes, with the exception of requiring, of course, the attribute points, because there's a cap on what you can get on certain classes. But I like that, basically, if you wanted to run a rogue that would use like a sword, you could go ahead and do that. It didn't lock you to just using bows, and that's something I felt like Diablo 3 kind of more so locked people into. I know it's not conventional, but that also opens up the doors to more unconventional builds. Like, for example, the Beast Rune Word in Diablo 2 allowed you to go ahead and be a bear, which is something that is on the Druid's tree, which again, it's unconventional, but I just think it's cool to have those things. But Another thing that I really enjoyed from Diablo 1 was how dark the game was. I feel like Diablo 1 definitely holds the title for the most dark out of the Diablo series. Diablo 2 is still great for that, but I really felt like in Diablo 3, one thing that I didn't really enjoy, which was like the boss would talk to you and say like, I'm going to destroy you, Nephilim. I just felt like that wasn't as impactful as just going there and seeing that guy that you've heard legends about, right? But I just felt like Diablo 1 still holds to be very dark as far as its lore goes, especially with like the sacrificing of like the virgin with the summoner. Like there's a lot of stuff in Diablo 1 which it was very like taboo at the time, and a lot of people did criticize the game for that. And in fact, that probably helped the games with the sales in the first place. But moving on to things that I really enjoyed in Diablo Hellfire, the oils, this would be similar to kind of like whetstones or the armor scrap in Path of Exile, which is basically your quality of the item. Basically, it just adds another thing to go ahead and have another sense of progression, where late game you're able to go ahead and upgrade your items that you already have, but just upgrading them slightly so they could be a little bit better. And then also hidden quests. There wasn't really too much in Diablo Hellfire that I really felt like wasn't implemented in the other Diablo games, but I like having these hidden quests. I think that is really cool to have the players kind of incentivized for exploration a little bit more, to find some of these Easter eggs and some of these other things. But I did like that they did have hidden quests. But moving on to things from Diablo 2. First off, I just feel like the music in Diablo 2 specifically sticks out more than any of the other Diablo games. If they can get Matt again, that would be excellent, but I'm not sure who's going to be doing the music, because obviously Diablo 4 is not even technically announced at the point of this video. But I really think that the music in Diablo 2 was just so great. If you compare the music to Diablo 3 and Diablo 2, I think that if you ask majority of people that have played both, I think 99% of people would say that Diablo 2 is a lot more memorable. I even tried listening to the Diablo 3 soundtrack, and I feel like it's more sounds than it was like music. And that sense of adventure and the tone of the music in Diablo 2 is just so spot on. But the next thing I want to talk about was obviously the cube. The Roderick Cube is something that I think should make a return. I do like Kunai's Cube too, from Diablo 3, but I think the Roderick Cube is just that next-gen mechanic that Diablo 2 had, and that was so awesome. And I really hope that does make a return for all of those crafting recipes. I know it's a little bit more complex, and they kind of want to make Diablo a little bit more accessible for more of a casual audience, but I really feel like allow those players that want to dig deep into the game. Maybe it's an end game item, like kind of like Kunai's Cube. Like, you don't have to utilize it to just go ahead and go through like a normal difficulty playthrough and complete the game. But I think that adding it into the game would be really awesome, and I think a lot of fans would really love to see that. Another thing that I really liked with Diablo 2, and technically this is also with Diablo 1, is the potion belt. Diablo 2 technically had those thawing potions, you had stamina potions, you had antidote potions, and even though a lot of them weren't really utilized, I like the idea of having multiple different potions rather than, okay, you have one potion like in D3 and you just, when you're low, you spam the potion, right? And I like the style that exists in Path of Exile, where they're more so flasks that not only like refill over time, so they're not just consumed on use, but they have different modifiers, like they can basically give you another stat. I think that would be something that would be really cool in the upcoming Diablo title. Another thing I really like, which was the strange builds using skills from other classes, like on a unique item. I think that would be really cool to see. Again, I mentioned like the Beast rune word that was on the source. Well, technically you can use it on a lot of different things, but basically it was this item over here. I'm just going to put up on screen so you guys can see what I'm talking about. But basically it would give you the ability to have skills from another class, and I think that is something that's really awesome. I would love to see that make a return. Also, having a large player base, this was something in Diablo 2, being able to have, those 8-player games, I think that is pretty cool. Although, I feel like that's kind of pushing it, because I think that they definitely want to release this on consoles as well, and generally those are going to be like 4-player. And they might have plans to release this on Switch, so that could be a little bit more of a task. But, if there's a maximum players on, let's say, console, just leave that maximum count at console, but keep that max players high on maybe other platforms, or eventually release it as you can optimize the game. I think that would be excellent as well. But I think it'd be really cool to have a lot of players doing certain like events, maybe clan events, because that was something that was supposed to be implemented into Diablo 2. They're supposed to have like this like guild system, but it never got to see the light of day. And then in Diablo 3 we had guilds, but I mean, what do you really do with guilds? You can see what other people have gotten, you can invite people, but it just seems like more of an extension of a friends list than really anything. But I would like to see more incorporation of like a large group party for very specific events. But still allow those players, if they don't want to play in a group, allow them to go ahead and be able to solo and play with effectiveness. And I also feel like this is something I previously mentioned, but in Diablo 2, I feel like there was a lot more meaningful quests. We're talking about getting stats and attribute points with like the Golden Bird and Jade Figure max HP boost, the Anya quest, like those kinds of things were really cool. And also being able to add sockets. So you would make basically new characters just to go ahead and be able to give a socket to another weapon or something like that. I think that was kind of cool. There's also kind of more of a permanency in Diablo 1 and 2 compared to Diablo 3. And there's a lot of criticism on that. Personally, for me, I actually don't mind that you're able to reset anytime, because keep in mind, guys, they definitely want this game to be casual, and if you make it so people are making a build and they're permanently locked to it, even though you could argue in Diablo 2, yeah, you can go ahead and get the token and reset, or you can get the quest from Act 1 and just reset. A lot of people can be very discouraged once they're like, oh, I messed up on my build, and then they just don't really want to play the game. So I'm curious to see what they do with that, because I know that that's a huge part of criticism, that there's no permanency to Diablo 3. You can just go ahead and swap on the fly. But the next thing I want to talk about is that you're able to use all of your skills in Diablo 2 and technically in Diablo 1. And I actually did really enjoy being able to utilize more than like that set amount of skills that you basically had, because you've put stat points into them, or technically with Diablo 3 you just have all the skills. But I'm not sure if they're going to be making a skill tree, but I just like the ability to have as many skills as I have, if that makes sense. But I'm not sure if that will actually be changed, because again, when we're looking at what they're trying to do for optimization through casual play with console, you only have so many buttons, right? But to be able to increase and give the players more freedom, I always like that over having the locked option of like, you know, you have like 5 or 6 skills or whatever the case may be with whatever game. But another thing I would like to see make a return is obviously runes and rune words. I think that, as well as charms, that's another great thing that Diablo 2 did add. However, with the charm space, maybe make it a set amount that you can actually hold. That most of these Diablo mods, and oh, by the way, because I know someone's probably going to be asking, what is the game that we're playing here? Because it's Diablo 2, but it looks a little bit different than maybe from what you remember in Diablo 2. This is a mod called Median XL. I'll leave a bunch of links actually in the pinned comment. But I've made tons of videos going over Median XL, and if you guys do want to learn more about it, it's a very excellent mod that I can highly recommend. But again, it really just comes down to locking the charm space. I think that would be an excellent way for people to still have charms but not fill up their inventory to the point where like they can't even loot with charms. So I know that was kind of a complaint that some people had with Diablo 2. But rune words, obviously, I think that's a no-brainer. Like, I think a lot of people do want to see that, and it would be cool to see a bunch of new rune words. And again, I would love to see more rune words that allow us to use skills and other maybe passives from another class. But also having jewels. I think jewels were really cool, like the rainbow facets. That was awesome. And I hope those also kind of make a return when like you would die. Basically, you could have it do something so it would clear out the enemies. I just think it's a cool idea. And technically it was for like elemental stats. But overall, it is really cool. And I also think that having runes is a great way to have partial currency. So in Path of Exile, and I'm going to mention a few things from Path of Exile because I feel like most people consider Path of Exile to be the true successor to Diablo 2. And the idea of runes is basically it's partial currency without having like a shard of whatever, right? But I like the idea of having runes as partial currency because you can upgrade them and stuff like that. And I like that concept. It's a easy way for people to feel like they are progressing, getting an item that they can use later down the line when they are essentially going for maybe more of an endgame build. They're still picking up stuff that allows them to reach the endgame. All right, so next up, things from Diablo 3 that I think were kind of an improvement and things that were kind of nice is the no stamina system. I think that was pretty nice. The auto pickup of golds and, well, some mats, because technically we still don't have the ability to pick up Death's Breath. I know the idea and gameplay mechanic is to make the materials feel like worthy, and also alert the player that, you know, you're picking up something that's very useful, right? But I feel like once you reach a certain threshold in Diablo 3, it just becomes kind of a chore to pick up some of these things. And I think maybe after you've reached max level, it will auto pick up materials, right? That would be excellent, I think, for quality of life. Another thing that Diablo 3 did do well is transmogs. I think that that's kind of cool because, I know some people will argue that they liked being able to know exactly what other people are using, but being able to have like an inspect key. In fact, some map hacks in Diablo 2 offered that, which a lot of people did use, and you'd be able to inspect people anyways. But I think being able to have transmogs is kind of cool. Because you can make the character look the way you want them to look. And I feel like with monetization of Diablo 4, more than likely they'll have some type of implementation of a transmog, which I'm totally okay if the microtransactions of Diablo 4, because I guarantee Diablo 4 will have some sort of microtransaction. I'd be okay with some type of transmog or like different outfits that you can get for your characters, as long as you know, it's within the realm of Diablo, if that makes sense. But anyways, loot goblins, I think were a pretty cool addition to Diablo. And then also proc modifiers. So like when using X skill, there's a chance that like this will work, or you know, when you use this skill, like it'll cast 3 times or whatever the case may be. I think proc modifications are actually really cool. And then I also think Kunai's Cube is an excellent addition. I would love to see a return of that because it adds more theory crafting and it adds potentially more builds that can emerge out of that. And this is something that I think it can be utilized as long as it's done in the right way. Is the ease to go ahead and change builds, basically. How it works in Diablo 3, where you can have these different builds and you can change completely different builds by just going to your armory and just swapping. You know, just with the click of a few buttons, you can go ahead and change your entire like inventory, your entire equipment, and as well as your skills. I think that that's really nice, and I do like that because, you know, you might have a build that wants to do very high end game content, and one will be something completely different. And I think that is kind of nice. And also with Diablo 3, they added the smart loot. So, for example, certain items that would be for barb, you obviously want that main barbarian stat, or basically strength, or whatever the case may be for whatever class. Making it have smart loot, I think that was kind of like a nice quality of life because it basically singled out the RNG to make it so things wouldn't be that bad. But going into things that are non-specific for Diablo games, things that I just want to see over here. I would love to see yellows be viable, meaning that you don't have to have uniques or, you know, legendaries in every single slot, or set items in every single slot. I think the idea of having yellows in the game be actually viable is really cool, because that way your item is completely unique and you can technically utilize it, and no one else will have it, if that makes sense, unless of course you're talking about things that got duped in like Diablo 2, like the Imp Shank boots that were insanely rare. But I would love to see also a trading system be implemented in maybe an auction house, but I'm curious to see how they handle it. Not necessarily a real money auction house, but some way to trade. I think Diablo needs a trade system. And then on top of that, some type of PvP would be excellent to have, maybe some guild battles, or essentially a reason to have a clan or a guild, right? Maybe some large-scale events, but don't make it so those people that just want to play like solo by themselves miss out on the opportunity to do some of those contents. Obviously, just go ahead and scale. I would love to see an offline mode as well. Not that it really matters too much for me majority of the time, but it's nice to be able to play the game offline if you want to. But I feel like this probably won't even happen. But you know, one can hope, right? And I also want a sustainable life cycle, like seasons or different events over the course of time, maybe some expansion packs. But I feel like just having some small things in Diablo 3 were nice, but I still feel like I want them to be a lot larger. They're probably going to need to have microtransactions, maybe like even a battle pass. I know it sounds crazy for Diablo, but every game needs to be able to have some type of monetization in order to continue its life cycle. And I think that with newer seasons, maybe they can add some way for us to basically be incentivized to coming back into the game when like the ladder resets. Another thing that would be nice is customizable UI. I think that would be really nice. And I overall just want more creativity and depth to builds. Basically just giving us more options. Again, I mentioned previously in like Diablo 1 had technically the most freedom with items and spells, but Diablo 2 I think is a good middle ground where you had certain things locked, but overall you had a little bit more of freedom with the characters. And again, they had a lot of skills that you could have on items that normally you wouldn't be able to use, but you'd have like these either charges or basically just grant us the ability to use skills so we don't have to go back to town and recharge or basically repair. But I like that. And then I would love to see the Paragon system either not implemented or changed completely, because it just basically comes down to, okay, Paragon 800, everyone's going to have the same stats, but then once you hit like, you know, Paragon 3K or whatever the amount of Paragon you hit after that, it basically becomes slam everything into main stat, right? Once you've maxed out, because you're maxing out every single thing, and just slam everything into main stat. But if they do happen to have a Paragon system, maybe have a cap where it's not like not attainable for a majority of the player base, because sometimes players will just feel discouraged, or you can't get a group if you don't have a high enough Paragon, and some groups literally will say, oh, well, you don't have enough Paragon, go download a bot, right? And I think that obviously most people don't want to go ahead and bot the game. At that point, you're not playing the game, right? But I think that would be nice to see a change to the Paragon system, not just like infinitely scaling. And I also feel like the sets in the game should not be 6 pieces unless you have like very, very specific sets that are like 6 pieces, maybe like 1 for each class. But the problem that I have with the sets being like 6 pieces is it basically kills any potential for variation in the build. There's only like maybe 1 difference, and I like the ability to have a lot of different builds in the game. I also really would like to see the return of a bunch of different Easter eggs in the game. And also very rare items. And what I mean by very rare items is, like in Diablo 3, you can acquire pretty much everything that you want within, like, let's say like a week of playtime. Even when the ladder resets, within a few days, people are already pretty much fully decked out with all of their gear. And I remember in like specifically Diablo 2, you'd be like, oh my gosh, this guy has an item that is so rare, I want to go ahead and get that item. And it takes you a lot longer. But I don't know if they're going to go ahead and do that, because again, they definitely want to be able to cater the game towards everyone, so everyone can kind of feel like they're able to progress in the game. But another thing I would like to see kind of change, and this is more so like going into Diablo 3, but with the way that the rune skills work, it basically became, okay, what element am I using? Okay, just pick that element. And you didn't really have to choose which one you wanted because of the way it behaved. You basically chose whatever element that it had. But as far as the microtransactions in the game, I'm hoping that, because I know it's going to have some type of microtransaction, right? But I would love to see them make it so it's just some sort of cosmetic or just stash space. I think that would be an excellent way to do that. I don't think they're going to make the game pay to win at all. Diablo Immortal might be a different story, but as far as Diablo 4 goes, I think that it will be a game that does well as far as like the microtransactions go. I hope, at least. I mean, maybe it'll be good for the first couple months, but we'll really have to wait and see how they decide to implement the business model. I would really hope for expansion packs, but I think that that's probably not going to be something that most people will be opting in to go for as far as the business model. I feel like most people want just basically a battle pass system. But the next thing that I want to talk about is like next gen mechanics in a game. And here's kind of what, like, I have to like show this example. This is from a game called Lineage Eternal, which was actually Project TL. Now the game basically got kind of canceled, but then it got renamed, and it hasn't been really talked about in several months, in fact. But anyways, I do kind of want to go ahead and show you guys what I'm talking about. So basically, there's a gameplay mechanic where you can like pick up the enemies with like this telekinetic ability, and then you would drag your mouse, and that would basically shove the enemy in the direction that you have your mouse going. There's another mechanic where like some of the skills, like you would drag and you would draw on this on the screen, and it would kind of implement that skill. I want something next gen. I don't want just a basic ARPG. I would like to see something that is mind-blowing. For example, when you look at Path of Exile's skill system, when you can mix in these skills that would basically be active skills, and then you have skills that modify skills, I think that is that next gen gameplay mechanic that I would love to see in Diablo 4. But anyways, guys, sorry it was kind of a long video, but there's just so many things that I would just want to see in Diablo 4, and I'm very hyped up about it. And if you guys are new here and do want to see Diablo 4, as well as other Diablo content, I do plan to upload a ton more in the next couple upcoming days. And if you guys want to see that, hit subscribe, turn that bell, and you'll definitely see more. But those are my things that I would like to see on my wish list. Let me know yours down below in the comment section below. But thanks for tuning in, guys. Have a good one. I'm signing out. Peace.